What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I want to continue to examine 100 years of world championship fights. I'm in the middle of 1965, and that would be the year that the great Ray Robinson would retire, hang up the gloves from a brilliant 25-year boxing Hall of Fame career. Now, Dave Anderson would write a brilliant and unbelievable book on great Ray Robinson, and he would have him ranked number one. Bert Sugar, a premier historian, would have him ranked number one as well. Curtis Anderson, brilliant boxing mind, would have Ray Robinson ranked number one as well. But Hardline Boxing and myself, Scrapbook Boxing, would have him ranked number three. Have Ray Robinson behind Sam Langford and Harry Greb. Sam Langford would begin boxing in 1902. He would win the Boston Amateur Championships. He would become a five-time colored heavyweight champion. He'd be an Australian heavyweight champion, colored middleweight champion, Mexican heavyweight champion. A phenomenal fighter was Sam Langford. 22 fights with the great Harry Greb. And that's where I have an issue with Ray Robinson when it comes to ranking him number one. Because Ray Robinson would win a bantamweight championship in 1938, was the Metropolitan AAU championship. But when it's time to turn professional, and he couldn't get past Maxim, no fault of his own, but he had problems with the heat. Sam Langford would win the colored heavyweight championship title 5 times. Harry Greb would have 45-0. Possibly 46-0 in one calendar year. But Ray Robinson was a 5-time middleweight champion, 1-time welterweight champion, 1-time Pennsylvania state middleweight champion. Let's take a look at his career. One of the greatest fighters in boxing history. And I have him pound for pound, the greatest fighter of all times. Greatest combination puncher. Can skip rope, going sideways, backwards, 360. He ran 5 miles a day. Never ducked any fighter of significance. Charlie Burley and Ray Robinson had different calendars in their schedule. The only fighter who might have sidestepped Charlie Burley was Henry Armstrong. Ray Robinson was a brilliant fighter. Ray Robinson had one of the best feats in boxing history. He could throw 8-punch combinations with the blink of an eye. He was the master of hooking off the jab. No one can do that greater than Ray Robinson. He can place you in positions that you are not prepared to defend yourself against. He can throw triple left hooks. You can ask Hans Stretch, Gerhard Hertz, and yes, even Gene Foreman. Look at this beautiful combination that Ray Robinson is throwing. A phenomenal fighter. The great Sugar Ray Robinson. We're looking at a silent video of one of the greatest punchers in boxing history, as he knocks out Rocky Graziano in 1952. Rocky Graziano was one of the greatest right-hand punchers in boxing history in the middleweight division, outside of Stanley Ketchel. He was a brilliant puncher. Arlen Hatchcock also could throw a right hand that would break your ribs. Ray Robinson could knock you out going backwards. He would throw 5 left hooks with one sequence. And no one has ever seen anything like this. He's knocking out Randy Turpin after being warned by Ruby Goldstein that I'm giving you one more round because Ray Robinson has suffered a cut over his eyes. Look at the beautiful shadow boxing by the great Ray Robinson. 5 left hook combinations. Right there, he just tagged Tommy Bell for the welterweight championship of the world. Beautiful fighter. Look at this beautiful 5-punch combination. My God. Ray would face Jake LaMotta at the Bronx Bowl a total of 6 times. He would win 5, and Jake would win 1. Ray would defeat Jake LaMotta in 1942. Then we'd face him again in 1943 in Chicago. He would lose to Jake LaMotta. But 3 weeks later, he would regain his defeat with Jake LaMotta. In between that time, he would take on Jackie Wilson of California. What a fighter was Ray Robinson.
To me, in his time, and even today, the pound for pound, when they say Sugar Ray Robinson was the greatest fighter pound for pound, meaning that I imagine if he was a heavyweight fighting the same style, he'd be the greatest. I would have to admit, I would have to say yes. I have his fight films, I've watched the films, you have them. That man was beautiful, timing, speed, reflexes, rhythm, his body, everything was beautiful. And to me, still, I would say pound for pound, I say I'm the greatest heavyweight of all times, but pound for pound, I still say Sugar Ray Robinson was the greatest of all times.
A great gentleman. I saw some of the punch that he, shoot at a guy, and he's pretty quick. And he was the type of guy that, would dance around, move around. He was real flashy. And knowing the guy in real life, as a person as of now he's retired, I think he's a swell guy.
Well, Sugar Ray Robinson, I've seen several times, and he's about the best boxer I ever seen. He was everything. He was fast. He had a good left hand, and the way he was moving in the fight was absolutely enormous. Clinched the guys up to the ropes, and every punch he threw away was a knockout punch.
Robinson in white trunks, Joey Archer in black. The first 3 rounds were very close. Here in round 4, both men begin to throw caution to the wind. Again, they stand toe-to-toe and slug it out. Robinson must win tonight to put himself back in contention once again for middleweight honor. Archer lands a stinging left-right combination that sends Robinson crashing to the canvas. The referee counts over Robinson after that perfectly timed combination by Archer. Robinson says he's all right, and the fight continues. Torrid punches by both fighters. Archer won rounds 8 and 9 with accurate rights to the body and head. Here in the 10th and final round, Joey is definitely ahead in the scoring. There's the bell signaling the end of this great fight. While the fighters continue to receive a standing ovation, the judge's decision goes to Joey Archer with a hard-fought victory over Ray Robinson.
Former heavyweight champion of the world, Max Schmeling, seen here successfully defending the title against young Scribbling, gives his opinion of Ray Robinson.
He was the greatest, scientific. He was a wonderful fighter, and he was a distant fighter. He was a half-distant fighter. He was a in fighter. He was smart. He was thinking. He was bucked with head, and he was elegant, and he was a. It was wonderful to see to fight him, you know.
1924. Tunney, a magnificent ring general, now 80 years old, remarked that Ray Robinson was perhaps the finest boxer he had ever seen. Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey, is here pulverizing Jess Willard to capture the heavyweight throne in 1919. Dempsey, one of the hardest punchers of all time, has seen every great fighter from the roaring 20s to the present. At 83, Jack declares that Ray Robinson, pound for pound, is the greatest combination puncher he has ever seen. Seen here in 1927, bombs out the rugged Jimmy Maloney. Here's Jack Sharkey today.
One of the finest of my era. Of course, the other guys in my era before me were rough, tough, murderous punchers, you know, like street fighting type. I think Ronald Robinson was the epitome of a boxing master, similar to Benny Leonard. Only Benny couldn't punch, but Robinson could punch. See, the great fighter. Similar to Benny Leonard. Only Benny couldn't punch, but Robinson could punch. See, there's a difference. He's a combination boxer-puncher. He's a great fighter. Great fighter. Great fighter.
Sugar Ray Robinson steps into the ring to gratefully acknowledge the thunderous applause. Never has the boxing world been so unanimous in its affection, and never was it so richly deserved. Ray stands in the same Madison Square Garden ring where 26 years ago he won the Golden Gloves and captured the World Welterweight Championship. This is a night he doesn't have to knock out an opponent to be declared the winner. There are 20,000 judges tonight, and they're all declaring him their permanent, all-time champion. Joining in the ceremony tonight are 4 men, all champions themselves. They have come to join in honoring Ray Robinson. Clever Bobo Olson, middleweight champion of the world, whom Ray defeated to win the crown the 3rd time. Ponderous punching Gene Fulmer, from whom Ray won the middleweight title a 4th time. Magnificent Carmen Basilio, welterweight and middleweight champion, from whom Ray won the title a 5th time.
All the way from Leamington, Spawn, England, the former middleweight champion of the world, Rocky Turner.
Ray Turpin, whom Ray defeated to win the championship the second time. The two men affectionately embrace each other. Turpin, Fulmer, Basilio, Olson, once Robinson's deadly adversaries, surround Sugar Ray to demonstrate their respect and admiration for this very special champion.
Respect. You had great fighters in Grubb's gym. Men who could bang with either hand. Go to the body. Come back up to the chin. You had that. Hard, devastating punches like Cleveland Williams. Master boxers like Santiago Garullo. You had Cleo Shane. And Steel Helmet, Turkey Thompson. I remember when Ray knocked out George Sugar Costner twice in one round. Didn't respect the fact that he used his name Sugar. It didn't help that George Sugar Costner would ask Ray's wife to dance. I met George Sugar Costner. Very nice man. But I have fighters like a Percy Bassett. Percy Bassett was from Philadelphia. Very good little fighter he was. Ray would spar with fighters from Detroit, like Moses Ward. Very good middleweight he was. You had middleweights and light heavyweights, such as Oscar Rankins, who would take on Billy Conn. Ray Robinson would spar with Oscar Rankins. He'd work out with Norman Hayes. Tough fighter he was. Ray would train with some of the fastest and hardest punchers of his day. He'd be in the ring sparring with Isaac Lugard. Very good Cuban welterweight. Was in the tournament when Ray Robinson would move up. He would fight middleweights. He was a champion. Carl Basilio would move in the division to face Ray Robinson. Very tough Jackie Wilson. Another very, very good fighter he was. You had fighters such as Clearly James and Nobby Joe Gans, who was the colored lightweight champion of the world. But none of these men were in the same league as the great Sugar Ray Robinson. Ray would have a protege, somewhat of a twin. His name was Louis Lightberg. He have a personal autograph of Louis Lightberg. Very good fighter he was. They used to call him Little Sugar Ray. You had Mr. Davey Moore, R.I.P. to him. And Hogan Kid Bassie. There was a great three-weight division, Henry Armstrong. I don't think anybody's record can compare with his in terms of what he's accomplished. The great Bo Jack. His name was Sidney Walker. Unbelievable fighter he was. He had great black fighters of the past. A fighter I would have loved to have seen Ray Robinson fight was Ezra Charles, both at middleweight. That would have been phenomenal. Young Amo Griffith would have been curious as well. Ray Robinson and Carmen Basilio really put on two outstanding fights. And Carmen Basilio never liked Ray Robinson. It always amazed me how Willie Pep, the great Ray Robinson, Ezra Charles, and Ike Williams, they would all turn professional, along with Jimmy Bivens. But the four, Charles, Williams, Robinson, and Pep, turned pro in 1940. They would become champion, but they would lose that title in 1951. All four of them. And they were great amateur fighters. One of the very best in all of boxing. And you know what the difference was? That Ray Robinson would be the only one of those four that would regain his title. He would lose it in 51, but he would regain it in 51. And that's what separates him from those four. That he would regain his loss. None of them have, outside of Willie Pep. Ray Robinson, greatest fighter pound for pound, skill set wise, negotiation wise. But he didn't accomplish what Sam Langford accomplished. And that's the only thing that separates him. Great fighter, the greatest fighter in boxing history, no question about it. But I have Sam Langford ranked number one because of his accomplishments. He endured things that Ray Robinson never had to endure. And that's incredible. He was a tremendous body puncher with Sam Langford. But what he has endured, what he has accomplished, Ray Robinson has not. And that's why I have Sam Langford ranked number one. Great fighters like Ezra Charles could throw combinations, blink of an eye. Charles had a beautiful jab. He was the greatest light heavyweight in all of boxing. Unfortunately, he didn't get a shot at a title. He was a magnificent fighter, was Ezra Charles. The great Charlie Burley never got an opportunity of a title shot. There was a lot of great opponents out there, 30s, 40s, and 1950s. The great Muhammad Ali tried to emulate Sugar Ray Robinson. In fact, he wanted Ray Robinson to become his manager. Ray Robinson and the great Randy Turpin. Ray showed a lot when he was able to make a comeback after he was cut. And the referee, Ruby Goldstein, would give him one more chance. That's what a champion does. He comes back and he regains what's rightfully his. He had great names like Sam McVeigh. He would be the Australian and colored heavyweight champion. Great powerful puncher. With Jack Johnson, would be the first black heavyweight champion in boxing history, 1908, when he would defeat Tommy Burns. Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. Another great fighter he was during his time. Ray was a great negotiator. He had a whole city block in Harlem. Ray Robinson, something else. So yes, Ray Robinson was the greatest pound for pound fighter in boxing history. When you look at all the criterias. Shout out to Ray Robinson, one of the greatest fighters of all times. I just have Ray Robinson number 3, Sam Langford number 1, and Harry Greb number 2. If you want more information on Great Ray Robinson, check out Hardline Boxing. He has phenomenal information on his channel. Curtis Anderson. Ray Robinson is his #1 greatest fighter of all times. He can tell you things that you can't read in a book nowhere about Ray Robinson. Or continue to listen to Scrapbook Boxing's channel. He will provide you with many pieces of information of Ray Robinson. Thanks for watching. 100 years of world championship fights. So long to the great Ray Robinson, as he ends his career in 1965, in the middle of our 100 years of championship fight series. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Salute. Watch out for more information on the great Ray Robinson and future shows of the Three Wise Men of Boxing. Curtis Anderson, Stormybman. Scrapbook Boxing.